Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Conforti. I am an associate financial advisor here at Bogart Wealth. And today I have a webinar for you on financial planning for college. So we'll really break it down into two sections here. There is the early stage where you kind of make the decisions on how much you're going to save and how you're going to save it for college. And also the late stage is kind of the second part of the webinar, where it's probably too late to affect savings too much. But now it's time to decide how you want to apply for aid and then also deciding on specific colleges. Sorry about that. In the early stages, the story is about cost specifically. So it depends on what type of college someone has in mind, if there is any sort of plans to transfer from one place to another, stuff along those lines. While the later stages is more on the actual potential for transferring, and the cost associated with that, as well as we'll have some different financial aid statistics included in that section. So as I go along, any questions you have, throw them in the chat box. I will get to as many of them as I can. And if not, I will reach out to you afterwards with some answers for you. Perfect. So next, we will look at a little bit about us as a firm first. So for those of you who may be new to Bogart Wealth, it is our mission to help clients achieve financial peace of mind by preserving and maximizing intergenerational wealth. That's kind of our mission statement. A little background on us. We have about $2.7 billion under assets under management to about 13,500 households. We are a registered investment advisor, which means we are an independent fiduciary working in all of our clients' best interests. We custody our assets at Charles Schwab for your protection. And something I think is pretty cool about Bogart Wealth is we are a fee-only financial management firm. Which kind of means we don't take any money from any sort of commissions or anything like that. It's solely based on assets under management. We have offices in McLean, Virginia, which is our headquarters where I'm located. We also have Houston, Texas, and the Woodlands. Next, we'll go through a little bit of our team. We have our leadership team, advisory team, portfolio management, which they'll do all the models, the research on the actual investment management side of things, client services, they're moving all the money, opening accounts, helping with estate cases, things along those lines. While the financial planning team is actually doing the NUA analysis using e-money financial planning software, as well as our own proprietary software to figure out what your retirement will look like. And then lastly, we have HR, BD, training, and marketing teams. So as a firm, financial planning is the core of what we do. This little chart right here kind of shows that continuous cycle that we have in mind. So starting with retirement analysis, different forms of cash flow and withdrawal planning, tax planning, investments, estates, and then the last piece, review and monitor, and again, in a circle to show that it is continuous. So with that, let us get started. Perfect. So yeah, as I mentioned, there are really the two phases to the college planning. The early stages, that's about the saving, how it's really the second biggest expense in a family's life. How much should you save? That's always a huge question. People are worried about over-saving, not saving enough. What is that right middle ground and how do you find it? And then how to save. There's a bunch of different options that you can utilize. Some have benefits in some areas while others have benefits in other areas. And then lastly, the late stages. So you're nearing the end. It's about time for your student to start college, or maybe they're already into it. How do you apply for financial aid? What sources do you use? What types of financial aid are there? And then how to stretch whatever you have saved as far as possible. So the first big piece is tuition. Everyone kind of hears about how much tuition has increased and the difference between different types of schools. So again, kind of as expected, private colleges, in-state, out-of-state, whatever it may be, no difference there than being private. are the most expensive when it comes to tuition and fees, with out-of-state public schools a little bit higher up there, and then in-state public schools and two-year universities and degrees on the lower end. But tuition isn't the whole story. You got to look at the next biggest piece is the housing and food. So I'm the oldest of four siblings, and we all went to pretty different schools. And you'll I've noticed a little bit that the price to live off campus in Southwest Virginia, Virginia Tech, where I went, is vastly different from the price of living off campus in, say, San Diego or Washington, D.C. And just another thing that you have to keep in mind, just because something's in state, there's more expensive parts of each state. And then books and supplies can also vary greatly. There's a lot of professors that kind of write their own textbooks, expect you to buy them. And then there's also other professors that provide a free textbook online. So it's kind of hard to gauge before you're applying, but just another factor in the expenses. And then tuition hikes. Again, everyone's kind of always heard about college prices are just rising astronomically, which they have. But in recent years, it's steadied out a little bit. Still rising, but maybe not to the level that we have seen in the past. So there's no knowing whether or not that will continue, that steadier rise. But it is always best in our eyes to plan for the most conservative, which is why we have tools such as different calculators. This is one that we found online using conservative. So it has a 5% increase rate in the tuition cost. So using conservative estimates is a good way to get a decent idea of a starting place for savings. We also have here, so this is a calculator that we use in eMoney. eMoney is our financial planning software. Here are two examples, Texas A&M or Virginia Tech, using estimates based on eMoney's data, whether tuitions, books, room and board, and other expenses, the differences there. As I mentioned, we do like to do the most conservative estimates possible, which is why we have the grants, scholarships, and other outside funds left blank. Kind of like to plan that those will not be there. The hope is that there are in some form or another, but typically in our estimates, we usually leave those blank. So the next question is where to save. The first thing most people think of are 529 accounts. There are pros and cons to those, of course. There's you get to retain control of the assets. They're tax-free, coming out for specific education expenses, which we'll look at in a second. But there's also cons. You lose flexibility in how you can use those assets. If they're not used for education purposes, the earnings on the amount pulled out will not only be considered taxable income, but there will also be a 10% penalty levied on those gains. Before 529s were introduced in the 80s and 90s, there were UGMAs and UTMAs, Uniform Transfer to Minors Act and Uniform Gift to Minors Act, both still in use today, but maybe not necessarily as much used for college expenses. They're basically individual accounts held, considered assets of the student or child, but in control of by the parents or whoever else. There's also the possibility of using Roth accounts for college purposes. One of the benefits there is you do have the flexibility if they decide not to go to university or want to use it separately. One of the downsides is although the amount that comes out isn't subject to the early withdrawal penalty, the earnings are counted as taxable income to the account. We have, so a little bit more into 529 specifically, uses again, tuition, room and board, books and fees, study abroad for credit. So a bunch of different options within typical universities, but they can also be used for grad school, community college, different types of apprenticeships, and even trade schools, for example. So if someone wanted to go to Culinary Institute of America, work as a chef, 529s would cover those. The big thing is as long as they participate in the Education Department's federal student aid program. They can also be used for K through 12 expenses, which is a pretty cool thing about them. It is limited to 10,000 per year per account, but specifically per account, not per student. So let's say you have a 529 account and your parents, their grandparents have a 529 account for them. You can use 10,000 from each of those accounts to pay for K through 12 expenses each year. That's a pretty cool little thing there. There's also the ability, so looking at the Secure Act changes, 10,000 lifetime limit to pay back loans, and then the excess rollover to IRA. So again, one of the big worries was always, I don't want to overfund anything. This allows you to up to $35,000 lifetime roll over excess 529 funds into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary on the 529 account. This does have to be done each year based on the contribution limit to the Roth, which this year would be 7,000. But that's a really good way to utilize those funds after they have finished their schooling. There's also the opportunity to transfer 529. You can switch it to any beneficiary out there. So let's say you have two children. You have say more for the older one. They don't end up using as much school or using it as much for school. So there's a little bit of excess. You use the Roth amount and convert the amount to a Roth. But then you have a younger child that you can just change the name on the 529 essentially, and use it for school for them as well. So pretty cool, decent flexibility, especially focused around education, which is again what they're meant for. They also have the benefit, a lot of 529s have different tax benefits. I know Virginia, up to $4,000 in contributions can be deducted against your state taxes. So pretty cool stuff there. So next, we'll take a look at the late stages of education planning. So let's see here. All right, so which school path do you need to plan for? Choosing a four-year public college, starting at a 2-year and transferring to a 4-year, starting at public college and transferring to private, starting at finishing 4-year private university, attend trade school right after high school. There's a ton of different options that are out there. And a lot of times it's hard to necessarily plan for them. A student might start college and realize they don't like where they are. There's a ton of stuff out there, but one of the things we have seen is a lot of times transferring does lead to increases in the cost of a degree. Where this really comes into play is a lot of times that transfer is coupled with a change in major, change in degree. And a lot of times schools have trouble transferring certain credits. So on average, it could add up to on average about $14,000 to the cost of the degree if there is some sort of transferring involved, especially an unplanned one. All right. This would be the types of aid. So there's two main types of aid. There's need-based and merit-based. And one cool thing about this is they are two completely separate buckets of money. So some families can draw from both of them. However, everyone does have access to the merit-based aid, while need-based is, again, based on need, depending on the school. So determined by FAFSA outcome and potentially the CSS profile. We'll go a lot more in depth on both of those shortly, but those are the two main ways for the need-based. And then merit-based, there's a bunch of different avenues there. So again, when it comes to the type of aid, what matters is getting the discount. It does not matter if it's labeled as need-based or merit aid, or a combination of both. Next, we'll look at some statistics. So nearly 90% of first-time college students receive some type of financial aid in 2023, 2024, and very similar number, 87% of all undergraduates receive some type of financial aid in that time. Average federal loan was around $13,000 in that same year. And then students missed out on up to $4 billion in unclaimed federal grants for different reasons. Um, Federal programs dispersed about 115 billion in student grants and loans for that academic year. And then federal student aid data also shows about 17 million FAFSAs. So that is the free application for student aid, which again we'll talk about in a second. So 17 million were submitted during that cycle. There are about 24 million students enrolled in undergrad and graduate programs in that time period. So that's 7 million unfiled FAFSAs, which again, a lot of people might assume that they do not qualify for aid, but it's super important to fill that out regardless. That 2023-2024 year initiative found that an average loan and scholarship aid for full-time students at four-year institutions was about 18,000. And then the next, so about 4.4 million applications from FAFSA would be first-time college students, while 75% are applicants who have attended college before, which kind of makes sense if you think about the typical four-year university. It'll be 4 years, so 25% versus the 75%. And then there's that kind of other thing I mentioned, that biggest misconception about FAFSA is that aid is reserved only for the low income students, with 25% of families thinking that they won't receive any aid. So looking at the two need-based forms. So there is, as I said, FAFSA, but then the CSS. So FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. It is a source of federal aid specifically, while the CSS can cover non-federal aid. So whether that is from the states, the institutions themselves, or private scholarships and loans. FAFSA is always free. And one of the big things with FAFSA is you can send your FAFSA application to up to 20 schools if you complete the forms online, which is super important. And with both of them, you can send them to different schools after your initial application. So if you think a student wants to apply to these 15 schools, but then they find out a little bit later they really want to go to a different one, you could send it to those a little bit later. Big difference with the CSS is it does cost more for each additional school that you send that to. Looking a little bit more at FAFSA specifically, again, free for everyone. It is strongly, strongly recommended that everyone complete it each year that your student is in school. There's a lot of free resources, a lot of high schools, colleges, just community events for helping fill out the FAFSA forms. The website is also a really good resource. They have all sorts of different live service technicians that'll kind of help, whether it's through chat or through the phone, that you can they'll help you walk through it. So looking at the FAFSA form, filled out fall of senior year and each fall thereafter. They usually become available October 1st. That's the date for both FAFSA and the CSS. Oftentimes it's recommended that you fill it out ASAP. Different states, different places have different deadlines. So the overall deadline for the 2026 school year it comes out October 1st, 2025, and the deadline is June 30th, 2026. So you do have a lot of time to fill it out. There's certain places, I think I saw it was like some certain Vermont state grant had a certain pool of money, and it was almost first come, first serve based on filling it out. So there are specific cases where filling it out earlier is definitely better. So often required to be considered for merit-based grants and scholarships, required for federal student loan programs. And as I was saying before, high schools have seminars to provide more information oftentimes. One sort of interesting thing about FAFSA to definitely keep in mind is it uses tax information from 2 years prior. So if you're applying for the 2025-2026 school year, it'll use tax information from 2023. We'll get into a little in a second why that is so important. All right. So here is the kind of the big breakdown here. Looking at FAFSA for determining a student's aid, how much aid they're eligible for, these are the percentages of different assets that will be taken into account. So again, takes in 5.6% of takes into account 5.64% of a parent's assets and up to 47% of their income, 20% of the students' at assets and up to 50% of their income, and then grandparents are not assessed at all. Items that are included in assets, so this is super important. So cash, savings, checking accounts are included in assets for both parents and students. Net worth of businesses, net worth of investments, including real estate, except for primary residence. So that would just be investment real estate, Airbnbs, rentals, stuff along those lines. And then also education savings accounts. So 529 accounts would be considered an asset of the parents, while the UGMAs and UTMAs will be counted as assets among the or for the students. So that's another place where 529s kind of have the edge, being only 5.64% counted versus the 20% counted of the UGMA, UTMAs. Some specifics that are not included in assets be, as I mentioned, the primary residence and all retirement plans. So I say they're not included in assets. So any 401ks, IRAs, anything like that will not be included in the 5.64% of assets. But any withdrawals or untaxed contributions will be counted as income. So if you're taking a monthly draw from your IRA each month to live off of, that will be taken into account as part of income. Also important to note that 529 accounts owned by the grandparents will not be included in any sort of assets, but distributions from them count as non-tax income to the student the next year. So it may seem that it's completely free, it will count towards the income section of students in those next couple of years. So there is a free calculator, as there is free calculators for everything these days, to kind of take an estimate on how much student aid you may be eligible for. You got to go through, put in your financial information, and it'll do a basic estimate on how much you think you'll be eligible for. Next, we will look at the CSS profile. So again, a little bit different than FAFSA in the fact that it's mostly focused on private financial aid. So whether it's from colleges, universities, or scholarship programs. And the big thing there is not every school is eligible. So a lot of schools require it, but not everyone accepts it. So Virginia Tech, for example, where I went to school, does not accept the CSS profile. Very similarly to FAFSA, it opens October 1st of each year. And again, there are different dates for deadlines, depending on the different schools. The other specific thing about CSS compared to FAFSA is the CSS can ask specific questions. So since it's kind of through the universities a lot of times, the schools will ask customized questions to each person to determine different types of aid. Next, so some national general university statistics. 405 national universities. I can lay here different undergraduate tuition and fees, graduate tuition and fees, averages among those 405, the average financial aid amount for those universities, average SAT scores, acceptance rate, and so on. So just some cool statistics there to kind of give you an idea of what to expect and what seems about average. Looking at private colleges specifically, 21% of college students attend private colleges and universities. Nearly all private colleges give merit aid. In some cases, they do give need-based aid as well. More expensive the institution, more likely families will qualify for that need-based aid. The top 20 top 20 colleges that award the largest merit scholarships are listed here. And there is a little specific there. The second column is percent of freshmen without need receiving merit-based aid. So it's of the ones that aren't receiving any need-based aid, only 3% receive, without receiving merit-based aid, receive need-based aid. For Duke, they're listed, again, the largest amount of merit-based aid there, and then so on. All right. And then here are the list of the most students receiving that merit-based aid. So the federal government only awards Pell Grants based on a student's need for money to pay for college. The colleges that report the highest percentage of students in that 2023-2024 year are listed there. All right. And then just touch on super quick Ivy League earnings myth. A lot of people are kind of under the impression that the only way for a student to succeed is going to the best school, and that's the only way things will work out. There's actually a study listed here by someone at Princeton that kind of showed that over about 30 years of finding this out, the earned salaries could be just as high as those Ivy League graduates at a school. So there is kind of lessening worries about having to get into those top schools. Lastly, we'll look at education analysis in eMoney. So this is one of the tools that we use specifically in that eMoney that really helps you determine how much you need to save. There's a really good breakdown of it, determining if you want to save more each month, save kind of a lump sum at the beginning, to break down how much a college it will cover based on the statistics of each university. So with that, me as well as all the other advisors here are happy to utilize one-on-one financial strategy sessions to discuss this specific college planning or any other of the topics in that kind of wheel we looked at earlier. We have an entire retirement readiness series of different webinars, seminars, anything on the list. If you have any ideas, anything you would like to hear about that we don't have listed or we have not talked about in the past, feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking for more topics to discuss and help you all with. If you have any questions in general, reach out to me, reach out to us. All our contact is there. And with that, thank you for joining me today. I'll kind of stick around for a little bit, talk about or be here for any questions that anyone may have on any of the specifics. And if not, hope you all have a great day.